We are live, and we're here with Alcoholic Satan of Pandemic Horde. So, you've been playing a while. Why don't you tell us who you are and when you started playing Eve and why?
So I am Alcoholic Satan. I've been a director in Horde now for almost 8 years. I started playing back in, I think it was 2016, if I remember correctly. And so I had gotten started years and years ago. I had done the free trial back before the alpha days a couple of times because I was a big RuneScape player back in the day. So uh, I really enjoyed MMOs, but for some reason, I don't know, maybe I was just too young, but Eve never really stuck with me. And then it wasn't until about, I guess, almost 10 years ago now, uh, yeah, back in 2016, I used to hound some of my buddies as a joke. I was like, oh, come on, let's download Eve. World War B is going on. Let's get into it. And one day I came home from work and he was like, dude, guess what we're playing? I said, what? I said, finally playing Eve. I said, awesome. Downloaded it. I played in high sec for a couple weeks. I ended up getting, I think, ganked by a wolf. And I was in a mining barge or something at the time. And I was like, you know what? To hell with this. I'm going to NullSec, and at the time, everyone was recommending to join. I think it was Dreadit, Karma Fleet, and Pandemic Horde Inc. And I joined Horde and have been there ever since.
Very cool. So, you are currently on the CSM, and you're
Yep.
going to be running again. What is your platform this year?
So for CSM19, I did a lot of work. We got Metanoxes introduced. We did some work around skyhooks. I got Concord Rogue Analysis Beacon prices reduced because the mega site was going through the roof. So we got the mega site requirements to build them cut in half. But basically, the big thing that I wanted going into CSM 18 was more reasons to go out and have things to blow up more casual objectives rather than just, the N+1 shield structure bashes and all that good stuff that, half the time people don't even go and follow up on. So something that I really want to go and push going into CSM19 is more conflict drivers, more reasons to go out in space and blow things up. There's some more work to be done with Concord Rogue Analysis Beacons. And what else? There was one more thing. The big thing that I kind of want to try and see if I can push is to kind of start to roll back some more of the surgical strike changes, specifically around fighter application. And there was another patch. Patch 18 it nerfed Drami slows, so I think that should be looked at as well.
Okay.
Get more caps and supers out in space.
So I can agree with that. I have a fairly young audience as in gameplay. Can you explain what the rogue analysis beacons are?
So Concord Rogue Analysis Beacons, I think, came out around 2 years ago now, if I remember correctly, somewhere
Yeah.
between 2 years ago and today. But basically, what they are is they are a deployable. You go and you buy them. You buy 3 of them because you can only anchor 3 per character per day. You go out into space. You anchor them as if they were a mobile depot. You can only link to them with combat capable carriers and supers. So that's your carrier, your super, dread, titan. Those are the only ships that can link to them. After 5 minutes, rats will begin spawning wave after wave, and you have an hour to complete the beacon. And there's a couple of different strategies that you can use to clear the beacon depending on how many actual characters you have. But for the most part, people in nullsec have multiple cap characters or super characters, so you just run them as fast as possible. And then you get a bunch of ISK rewards, and there's also mutaplasma drops for drones and fighter support units and drone damage amplifiers. And then you also get something what is called red loot. I don't remember exactly. It's like I don't remember the exact name of it off the top of my head, what the item is called, but basically it's just like kind of like the stuff that you get from abyssals, and you turn it in and sell it to NPC orders for money.
Okay, very cool. So, what do you think the biggest challenge is facing new players coming into EVE today?
The biggest is just the game is so big, so vast. There's so much to do, and a lot of it just isn't fun. Like compared to a lot of MMOs, like there's no like a lot of like PvE in this game is a chore. Whereas like if you take a game like RuneScape, people will gladly do like 99 fishing, or like get 99 or mining or something like that. But there's nothing like a lot of people who log into the game, they do what they do and nobody ever really has fun with it. It's more of like the people that they hang out with kind of makes them stick around. Um, so I feel like that's a big challenge for new players because it's almost like if the game, I mean, there's a lot more like to it because I mean, like there's a lot more technical aspects to the game. There's a lot of mechanics and whatnot that can be confusing, uh, but all that can be learned with time. But the problem is just like when you're a new player joining the game and you're just kind of like slapped in the face with a whole bunch to do, and none of it's really like fun to keep you around.
Okay, so do you find you're not directly active with the part of your organization that recruits new players and trains them up and helps them out, are you?
I am, but I'm not. I go through periods of times where I'm like involved.
Okay, so I'm sure you talk to the recruiters quite a bit. How hard is it for them to try to get newer players out into nullsec?
So this is kind of unique for us because a lot of we don't really actively recruit. Some of the other corps within Horde do, and they have their own programs and projects that they do to go out and recruit from outside of the alliance and outside of MilSec. Um, we actually there was a video that came out a little bit ago. I forget the name of the person who made it, but they made like uh, kind of like how to earn your first like billion or something with a Vexer in Pandemic Horde video, and that got us a lot of that actually drove massive recruitment within Horde. Um, so it's kind of unique for us in that Pandemic Horde Inc., which is the newbie part of the alliance, we don't really like actively recruit. Everyone just kind of comes to us because we're one of the big name organizations that everyone knows about, and a lot of people still recommend to this day.
Okay, do you feel that new players come out to nullsec too early?
I actually think that new players should be coming out to nullsec as soon as possible. I have this weird kind of like unique stance on high sec where I believe that it should be treated for anyone who's played RuneScape kind of like Tutorial Island, where you join the game and you learn the basics. Like this is how you do this skill, this is how you do this skill, this is how you do that. Now, go out into the world and um, I guess in an ideal world, at the very end of that, it would be like, okay, this is a list of organizations that you can join. You should go out there and do it. So I actually think people should come out to MilSec sooner, or even LowSec if that's your cup of tea. But I think people should be leaving HighSec as soon as possible.
Okay, and then what suggestions would you give to CCP to improve new player retention?
There's definitely some things that can be simplified, but there's like the see, this is kind of tough for me because I mean like there's so many things in this game that have such complex like intricacies that they this is kind of like one of those things where they could take a year off of expansions and just kind of like start simplifying the game a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
and start getting rid of a lot of complex interactions. And, this mechanic works this way, but, it doesn't for these two situations and things like that. And I think like, yeah,
Hmm.
that's pretty much it.
Okay.
There's there's definitely a lot they can do, but it definitely requires a long, like, drawn out
Right.
conversation with them that you would have to have.
So some of the conversations I've had with people over the past year that, I've been in the CSM myself and that also campaigning, a lot of people seem to think that there would be better retention if maybe we got rid of like the attributes, which CCP promised us and hasn't done yet, and or maybe give the new players coming in all the Magic 14 up to 5. What do you think about that?
I think this is actually something that I brought up at least once or twice on 18 was asking for updates and where we were at with removing skill attributes. That was also something that I had asked when Gobbins, my CEO, was on the CSM for him to constantly ask them and hound them about. That is something that I would love to see. Just eliminate attributes, give everyone max training time. Um, and then there's definitely a case to be made to give new players a lot more skills than what they currently have so that there's less catch up and you're spending less time training just to be able to fly ships in the game. So that way, especially like fights can be more rewarding for new players because a lot of doctrines in nullsec or other parts of the game is ships that new players aren't. They can't really obtain that quickly, and so they're stuck training for like 1, 2, 3 months before they can even fly something that may be worthwhile to them in a doctrine. So eliminating that barrier to entry super early into the game would definitely be very nice, very helpful.
So, do you guys have something on your doctrine list that new players say, like a 30-day-old player can come out and fly in some of the big ops?
So part of joining Pandemic Horde, we give out what we call the new being care package, and inside every new being care package is, I think it's like a dozen ships or something like that. We give tackle frigates from each race, and then we give Ewar frigates from each race, and then we also give other ships as well to get you started. But every fleet that we call for, we are always, not allowing, but encouraging people to go and fly their Ewar frigates. I know for a while we had somebody that was running a specific Ewar wing in strat fleets where they would get all of the newbies in their T1 Ewar frigs and they would kind of like fly them around in a specialized wing. Um, and then tackle is always appreciated, especially on roams and whatnot. We do a lot of roams where everyone always need tackle. Everyone knows the famous quote where from This Is Really Eve, where he's screaming about leaving fleet with one dictator.
Yep.
But the same can be true about just simple T1 tackle frigs. There's a lot of potential for hero tackle out there, and it's always appreciated.
What would you tell new players who think that the E-War frigs and other, I guess, support roles where they want to go and fly the big DPS ships? What would you tell them about the smaller, support?
So small. I've always really loved Ewar. Ewar is something that I don't think is appreciated enough because there's certain ships like Jams and um, well, Jams is the most noticeable one, especially after the rework, even though it's not really in a
Mm-hmm.
great place compared to what it was. But there's something gratifying about sitting, like 100 kilometers away from any DPS ships where they can't shoot you. Um, but they also can't shoot anyone else. Or,
Yep.
if you're jamming out their logi, they can't rep anyone It breaks the logi chain. And then there's other Ewar roles that don't. It's less noticeable because I mean, like, you can't really tell how well you're doing if you're tracking disrupting someone or if you're scan res damping them. But Ewar can definitely be very rewarding, and if you're someone who like really likes to mess with people, it's definitely a role that you should look into and take pride in flying.
I agree 100% on that one. I love Ewar. My Falcon is, my baby. So then, when is the last time that you actually ran through the NPE?
So it's been a hot minute. I think it's been over like a year and a half at this point.
Okay.
I remember it vaguely, but it's definitely been a while.
So you've at least seen the newest NPE. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Well, everyone knows that, I'm kind of like the community person. I am pretty passionate about that. What is your definition of community in Eve?
So my definition of community is it's just kind of like who you hang out with and like where you call home. But there's also multiple levels of community, especially within a single organization. So for me, for example, Pandemic Horde as an alliance is my community, but then I'm also director of a corp within Horde called the Bless Beans, and that's also another community that I hold near and dear to myself. And then I've been running the SIG, the Capital Umbrella Defense, or Capital Defense Umbrella SIG, known as PanCrab, for I think like 5 years now, and that's another community. So sometimes they don't always interact with each other. Sometimes they do. Sometimes you see the same people that you love to hang out with in multiple different parts of that community. But to me, community is where the home is.
Do you consider communities like Eve Rookies, the MPSI community, Broadcast for Reps, actual legit communities within the Eve umbrella?
Oh, 100%. Absolutely. They don't have to be just like a nullsec alliance or a faction warfare group. It could be a group of people that like Eve Rookies, where you may belong to um, different organizations within Eve, but you guys come together and run fleets every once in a while together. So it doesn't have to be like an alliance or something.
Okay. Then, toxicity. I wanted to take a minute to talk about that. When I'm talking about toxicity, I'm not talking about PvP ganking, melting the face off a new bro that's been out for a day. Your wars between yourselves and goons and everybody else out there, or even lighthearted salts and stuff like that. I'm talking about the heavy stuff that we just don't want to bring into the game from the real world. Do you think that this is a problem in Eve still?
There's definitely it has gotten a lot better
Yeah.
over the years that I've been playing, and I know some people who've been playing much longer than me can say that it's been a lot better than what it used to be into the past. But as we can see, especially from the recent post from one of my alliance mates on Reddit when they killed, I think it was a Brave Dread, they said some pretty not so good things,
Yeah.
and it still exists in the game, and it should.
What do you personally do when you come across it?
So, as an alliance director, we have zero tolerance for any racism, bigotry, homophobia, things like that. We actually created kind of like a position, you could say. We call them sheriffs within the alliance, where if you have any problems or people are harassing you, DMing you, people are saying public things that they shouldn't, you can take it to them, screenshot it, and we will instantly ban them and we will get rid of them as soon as possible. We have zero tolerance for any of that within Horde.
So you guys even hold people accountable on Discord or Reddit and other places?
Yep,
Awesome.
absolutely.
Okay, now we're going to move to what's become my favorite part of the interview. And with non-CSM candidates, this is a lot of let's pretend, but with, previous CSM or the current CSM, this is more, telling people, giving advice. So when we get into our first meeting for the year, we're told what's coming. And I think we got told what for the next year and a half, something like that.
Something like that. We came in at the start of the last expansion,
Yeah.
and then it was that brief onboarding period, and then I think it was like towards November we found out what the next expansion was going to be, or
When
like what was going to be included.
yeah, when we find out what's actually on the docket and if there is CSM who campaign for a certain thing and find out that their platform isn't really being talked about, what advice would you give them?
My advice to them is, I mean, so there may be things that aren't on the expansion, like docket, I guess you could say, or the agenda. But there may be things that are near and dear to you. You can still talk about them. You're encouraged to talk about them. Sometimes there is room to add things, or maybe have uh, things adjusted and whatnot. Um, but you should also kind of go out and at least try and be, I mean, you don't have to be, but you can be, go out and like learn about the topics at hand to become a bit more knowledgeable and try and maybe find issues within to push that they can possibly fix with the upcoming expansion that has to deal with it. Um, but there was on 18, there were a couple of things that weren't going to be included at all. Like they had no plans to touch crab beacons or anything, and I incessantly pushed that a couple of times throughout at least a month throughout the term. I was talking to developers and whatnot and trying to get things resolved with it. And I didn't get everything I wanted resolved, but I did get the price adjustment. So even if there's nothing um, that you personally campaigned on, is it might not be coming up in the expansion. I mean, there's still kind of sort of some wiggle room. Sometimes they can include it, sometimes they can't.
And then, of course, when we play Eve long enough, our gameplay gets nerfed, altered, maybe even taken out of the game completely. When that comes up, what advice would you give future CSM on how to handle that?
So unfortunately, I've had this happen twice now. So rest in peace, Rorquals 2020. um, that was an awful time. It still gives me PTSD, haunts my nightmares still. And fortunately, I've in this stage of grief where I've just accepted that that is never coming back to the game, and now I get to help others see the light that it's never coming back either. But even more recently with the Equinox expansion, Salve updates, so Sino Beacons are an integral part of a home defense umbrella. And because of the reagent cost and how many more, at the time, it was going to be billions worth. I think before they did the number pass, it was going to be like 14 billion to run a single Sino beacon, basically. But even after the number adjustment, it's going to be still closer, but below 1 billion. So going forward, I mean, there's just all the Sino beacons that we currently rely on to save capitals and whatnot are going to be going away. So it's going to be an adjustment. And that's just what you have to do. You have to adapt.
And would you advise the future CSM to really think about, even if it's going to affect their own gameplay or their community's gameplay, but it's better for Eve to, understand and go with it, or argue and try to keep that gameplay for their community?
So if it's going to be for the betterment of Eve, I mean, it you can't really argue against it. It's just something that you have to accept and adapt and overcome. It sucks. I know it's horrible. It's a terrible feeling. Depending on how much you love it, it can be very depressing and upsetting. But you just gotta, for the health of the game, you just gotta move past it.
Yeah, I feel that way about nullified interceptors, so yeah, I'm there too. Now, not all communities out in Eve have a CSM representative. How do you feel about these groups coming to you and asking for your help?
So nobody ever really kind of reached out to me from any other groups. That's not something I really had to experience when I was on CSM19. Um, but if anyone ever did come out, reach out to me, and it may be something that I wasn't knowledgeable about, I'm going to take the time investment to learn more about the issue at hand, and ask a bunch of questions, and um, push that to CCP to hopefully get it resolved, whatever it may be.
Cool. And then the last question in this particular section is I think we've both felt this pretty heavily, but sometimes players think that our job is to go in and demand that CCP fixes things or demand that CCP implements things. What advice would you give to the future CSM on balancing the limitations placed on us as a CSM with making sure players actually feel heard?
So at the end of the day, we are not paid by the company. We have no power. The only thing that we can do is voice concerns of our community, push problems, basically just be incessant about it, and talk about them as much as possible, and just make sure that they're aware, that whatever the issue may be is on their radar. There's been issues that I've posted about that after a couple of times, they were like, oh, we didn't, that wasn't really something that we knew about. So even just talking about it is good, and making sure that you're heard and pushing it. Because even going back to the previous question about, something that you campaign for isn't on the next expansion list, it may not get fixed during the current expansion cycle, but it might be fixed during the next one or the one after that. So it's always good to be talking about issues and just making sure that you're pushing them, because they don't have to do what you say. You can't go in there and be like, I demand this to be changed. That's not how it works. And oftentimes that can lead to developers just not wanting to interact with you at all. But just pushing problems and making sure that they're aware of them is what we're there for.
Now, my community has a few questions that I'm putting forth to this year's candidates. And the first one is your stance on multiboxing. Where this comes from is half of my community, they are multi-boxers. They go out and they box maybe incursions or home fronts, mine, that type of thing. The other half honestly believe that everyone should be reduced down to one account and only one account, maybe even get rid of slots 2 and 3. What is your opinion on this?
So I've been in those discussions with you where you have pushed issues with multi-boxing, especially with the home front sites and things like seagulling and whatnot. Um, and I understand those concerns, but unfortunately, Eve is such a game that encourages multi-boxing that it's such an
Mm-hmm.
integral part of the game. Like if you can't multi-box, all of a sudden, there's uh, secondary consequences, and consequences beyond that, and consequences beyond that. Like all of a sudden, if you were to go and eliminate multi-boxing, then it becomes a struggle to move capitals because now you don't have a sino wall. Um, and for small gangs that rely on multi-boxing, where you might have a DPS ship, but then you're also flying links or maybe a tackle alt or something. Those groups get affected. Um, so there's a lot of situations where if you were to all of a sudden eliminate multi-boxing, that I feel like that would be a very like net negative to the overall state of the game.
Yeah, not even talking about the financial implementations of CCP.
Yep.
Yep. And kind of along these lines, how do you feel about skill injectors?
I I'm like I know there's skill injectors is a very contentious topic. Um, but I'm kind of indifferent to them. I don't really see them as like a bad thing. And they can be good. But also, if you are the type of person where you feel the need to like inject into everything, that's also a bad thing. Um, they're a good catch-up device for people who are new to the game, um, and they're also useful for injecting alts and whatnot. But I don't really see them as like issue.
Okay. And then during our term, CCP introduced the new skill injectors on the NES. What do you think about those?
You're talking about
Oh,
the
the
15,000
accelerators. Yeah, the accelerators. I think I said skill injectors.
accelerators.
Yeah.
um, I'm gonna be honest. I didn't even know that they put new skill accelerators on the what you said the NES,
Yeah, the store.
or I guess the new yeah. I don't ever really go to the store, so I
Okay,
didn't even know.
fair enough. And then the very last question, well, second to last, is what do you think is one of the most pressing issues in Eve today?
Definitely player retention. Um, Eve has no problems with getting people into the game. The problem is with holding on to those people.
What I know we kind of talked about the retention before. So I asked a couple other candidates this. Do you think figuring out that bridge from the career missions into faction warfare, do you think that that would actually be the answer of sending them there first and then, getting them into other activities from faction warfare?
I think in an ideal world, CCP takes like maybe not like oh, I think in an ideal world, CCP takes a substantial time and really like redoes the whole new player experience. Um, I talked about it before, but preferably, I would like to see the NPE redone again. I know a lot of people say it has issues. I would like to. It just feels incomplete
Mm-hmm.
currently. I would like it to teach more things, and then kind of like after the NPE is done, just kind of like keep nudging you along and be like, well, now you can do this, and then you can do this. I would like to see the mission system completely redone. Get rid of all the attributes and or like redo the implant skills
Mm-hmm.
like they had originally wanted to. Um, and then there's um, adding more skills to new players so that they can get into like some of the not like you can't like day one battleship or anything, but being able to fly cruisers fairly well, and
Right.
not needing so many fitting skills and whatnot. Give them the Magic 14 and things like that. Um, Taking some of that early time investment out will do a lot, and then you know it. Then there's no like some people. I actually saw this recently that some people kind of like think this is almost predatory in a way, but I never really like I don't know. I never saw it that way. But there's no like crack in this game that like keeps you to like wanting to log in every day.
Right.
There's no like dopamine hits. PvE is an absolute chore. You just go and grind a bunch of ISK in your wallet to afford, the ship or doctrine that you want to fly, and then you're broke again. And then you have to grind that PvE again. And it's just not fun. I think PvE really needs to take a deep look at and be redone to like better reward you. And there needs to be like more better celebrations of your accomplishments, and more
Yeah.
like dopamine hits that kind of like keep you coming back and wanting to show off your achievements and stuff like that. Eve just doesn't do that in a very good way, and I feel like fixing all of those problems puts us in a good direction to keep players like logging in and coming back, not just a week from now, but 6 months from now, a year from now.
So you had mentioned that maybe the MPE needs, or there needs to be a continued, like, do this, do that, go here. don't you think that that would be controversial with some of the old players? You know, the ones who walk to school both way uphill in 5 feet of snow with the wind against them. Because I always
Uh,
get a sense of, you know, well, I had to do it the hard way. I don't see why we have to spoon feed.
I think a lot of people they because I remember when they did there was that period of time where when they were redoing the NPE into the current iteration that we have now, a lot of people were upset with it, and they were like, you know, why are they spending all this time doing all this content for new players, and you know they're just kind of setting aside the veterans who've been playing this game. They're not giving us anything. Um, but at the end of the day, I mean, without eventually, as I forget who had mentioned it, but like the veterans aren't going to be around uh, for, you know, a lot of us have been quitting the game, especially after scarcity. Scarcity took a huge chunk of the player base that had been playing for, you know, 10, 15 years, and they're never coming back. And then a lot of us continue to grow and get better jobs and start families. You know, we have other time commitments that we have to um, take care of now, and you know our time for video games gets less and less, so you have to go and cater to that new generation of gamer to get them interested in Eve, keep them interested in logging in and coming back time and time again. So I think CCP can do better at doing multiple things at the same time. This is something that they can currently struggle with. And if they get to that point, I think that there'll come a time where they'll be able to go and do both, redo the NPE, but then also still cater and give updates to veterans and whatnot. And they definitely need to get to that point.
Do you think that they're hesitating on doing something like that? I guess more like the Warcraft generation, you know, because they're afraid of running off the older players.
I would be more afraid of not having a job in 10 years than running off the current player base. You know, I mean, there is going to come a point in time where, you know, every year you're going to have less of your older player base logging in. And if you're not keeping new players around, I mean, you're just going to be out of a job. So I would be more afraid of that than anything.
Okay, so we're going to open up the room to questions out there in Twitchland. So if you have any, hurry up and type them right now. Both Satan and I are going to have to go very soon for a meeting. And in the meantime, while they are hopefully furiously writing some questions, what other candidates would you like to see elected this year?
Uh, Number one, definitely Seto. He and I seem to align with a lot of things, so I'm hoping that he gets elected. Um, there was, I'm forgetting his name off the top of my head. I think the first part of his name was Mitch, the wormhole candidate.
Oh, Mick Fightmaster.
Mick Fightmaster. Yeah. I think he would be cool to have on, just to have a wormhole candidate and have some diversity in there. Um, just going off the whole um, his look. I think Young Puke is definitely an interesting person. He would be cool to have on. um, but yeah, I think there's what like five spots that are going to be available
Yeah,
on CSM19. So there's room for new blood. It'll be interesting to see who gets reelected and who gets elected for the first time.
indeed. So we have a Subcat Pilot that just says new Zarzak stuff. So I assume he wants to know what kind of new Zarzak stuff you would recommend, maybe?
Um, I do not do anything faction warfare. I am a nullsec one trick pony. I do not interact with Zarzak in any way, so I couldn't recommend anything new to go into Zarzak.
Have you been following the. Oh, there's a new announcement in 20 minutes. Okay.
Oh yeah, the
Structure,
Deathless
yeah.
video. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I have some community members that are definitely into this and are very excited and are keeping the rest of us appraised so we can live vicariously through them. Any other questions, guys? And then I have one last question for you.
Sure.
So, at Summit this year, we had a chance to play the EVE Online board game. Are you going to actually let me win this year?
But I was the first to lose. What do you mean? I got curb stomped.
No, you guys took me out first.
What did we?
Yes.
I remember. So what I remember was I was gonna go for the economic victory, but then I was like, that doesn't really seem fun. I'm just gonna throw my forces all around the place, and then I got shit stomped. Sorry, I don't know if I can curse. Which.
Oh, I don't care. Yeah.
And then I know Storm Delay ended up rolling the entire board, and he ended up winning pretty handedly.
Well, yeah, because you, me, and Oz were all focused on trying to take each other out.
It was definitely a good time. I hope we get to play again if both of us get reelected.
I really hope so too. I definitely would recommend having another board game night. I should have my coffee by then. Okay, it doesn't look like that we have any other questions coming. If people would like to continue the conversation with you, where can they find you?
You can go ahead and ping me on the EVE Discord. Something that I'll be doing going forward is being more active there. You can throw questions up on my forum thread on the EVE forums. You could DM me directly if you so choose. Those are the best ways to get into contact with me. DM me on Discord, that is.
Do you answer your EVE mail?
I do. So it depends. There are sometimes I do. If it's like a pressing issue or people have like genuine questions, I will. But I also get a lot of like random trash emailed to me, surprisingly.